I'm not really a rye whiskey guy, not a rye guy. At least that's what I thought until I met these whiskeys. What's up, everybody? It's Ty the Bourbon Guy, and welcome back to my channel. Rye whiskey is a category that for me was one that, like, I was into bourbon, I was feeling that, but rye just was different for me. It was something that I didn't really enjoy. It felt, you know, the pine notes and all the mint notes, it just wasn't for me until I found a few particular bottles. And then from there, I feel like my rye whiskey journey has just kind of gone crazy. Like, now I'm willing to try any rye basically that there is. But let's talk about 10 of them. 10 rye whiskeys that changed my whole perception of this category. All right, honorable mentions: Old Forester Rye and Pikesville Rye from Heaven Hill. These two rye whiskeys are ryes that I actually did enjoy, preferred them more in cocktails. I could drink them neat, but I didn't mind them necessarily. But looking at the rest of this list, I didn't think that they had as much of an impact. But I do think that for anybody trying to get into rye whiskey, I could see how a lot of people start here. These price points are pretty fair. I think $30, $35 range from what I've seen in my area, but I could definitely tell why people lean to these. But again, there's just some other bottles that I've come across in this list that I think that get the nudge over these two bottles. All right, number one, Peerless Rye Whiskey. Peerless is I would say the brand that pretty much started it all for me. Peerless was a brand that I was actually in Newport, Kentucky, you know, sampling different whiskeys and things like that. And they said they were sampling Peerless Rye Whiskey. You know, I'm like, I'm not a rye guy, you know, I'm more into bourbon, blah, blah, blah. They were like, just try it. That's it. And I tried it and I was like, are you sure? Like, what is that? Like, are you sure that's a rye? Because it tastes different from what I know a rye whiskey to be in my very limited palate at that point. It was one that I think I bought the bottle immediately or something like that. Either that or I went back the next day and bought one. Peerless, ever since that point, has been on my shelf, regardless of other rye whiskeys that have come and gone or whatever that I've wanted to try. Peerless has been a staple and is one of the ones that I credit me enjoying rye whiskey as a whole category just from liking this particular bottle. All right, number two, Hard Truth Sweet Mash Rye. Here's another one that I credit a lot to when it comes to me liking this category as a whole. Their sweet mash process, I think, changes the perception of what I thought within a rye whiskey or what it could be, and they changed the game. And not only with this particular part of their lineup, but now they've just expanded into all different types of ryes, and they've even dipped into bourbon now, which their 4 grain is amazing if you haven't had that, but it's not about bourbon today, we're talking about rye. So in general though, this rye whiskey is just one that it blew me away. It was something that at the time I felt like, okay, a craft distiller, you know, how good is it gonna be, whatever the case is, but I had a lot of good luck with Peerless. I thought Peerless was pretty good, right? So I'm gonna try this and just see, and I did not regret it at all. It was one of the best whiskeys that I had at that particular time, not just within rye, but whiskeys overall. All right, number 3, Rossville Union. This is actually an MGP product. So for those unfamiliar, MGP is a company that basically creates a lot of whiskey, and at the time used to source out to a lot of different people to kind of help them with their processes, but kind of kept some of that stuff in-house, especially with this whiskey boom. Probably realized, hey, we could be making money on our own products instead of selling them. I mean, they're still making money on it, but either way, they decided to have certain brands for themselves, and this was one of them. This particular bottle represents a single barrel that I had at the time. This was a store pick, same type of thing. You know, a store offers me a sample. I tell them I don't drink rye whiskey, and they tell me just try it. And I tried it, and I was like, what is this? Like the chocolate notes in there, and just, it was so different from other ryes that I'd had. Even at that time, my very limited knowledge of rye whiskey, it was so different from that. Pulled me in a whole different direction. So I had to not only get that bottle, but I recommended it to like everybody in my area to go get that particular single barrel. Now, Rossville Union as a whole has still been pretty good. I've found other store picks and things like that that have been pretty good. That particular one was one of those special bottles for sure, but never had a problem with any of the rest of them either. Number 4, Russell's Reserve Single Barrel Rye. This actually was one that I got a chance to try while I was at Wild Turkey, and just, again, same concept here, right? Same things going from one to the other. Just kind of blew me away. Was not expecting it. If we've learned anything, it's if somebody lets you try something, even if you don't think you're gonna like it, it's kind of like going back to when I was a kid, right? Like, you know, have a no thank you bite. Try it first to see if you don't like it or if you like it. and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. I definitely was in this case, as I was with this rest of this list. Being at Wild Turkey and just the history behind it, and Jimmy Russell was there at the time, a magical place in my opinion in general, and to have some of their ryes and sit there with them, and just an unbelievable experience, and it really put it on the map for me. I know a lot of people kind of think of this in the same category as their rare breed rye as well, that Wild Turkey rye product coming out of there. And some people actually prefer the rare breed over this, but for me, I guess because this is where I started with it, this is still definitely a bottle that I always keep in my bar. All right, number 5, Jack Daniel's Single Barrel Rye. So before the barrel proof single barrel ryes and before all the heritage ryes and all those other things that they've done, this is where it started, for me at least. It was, and I've told the story before on the channel, the idea of working with Jack Daniel's and kind of talking with one of their reps there and telling them my thought of Jack Daniel's, and you know, I'm not really a fan. They changed my whole perception and I tried their other products and it opened my eyes to what Jack Daniel's can do as a whole. Part of that was rye. So now you've kind of broken the idea of what Jack Daniel's is to me, because I tried the single barrel Tennessee whiskey and the barrel proof single barrel, but now you move to rye and it's like, man, I thought I didn't like Jack Daniel's, I was wrong. And I thought that I didn't like rye, I was wrong. And so when I tried this, it was like the best of both worlds. And I realized that Jack Daniel's doesn't just make Tennessee whiskey very well, they make whiskey very well. Rye being one of them as well. All right, number 6, Sagamore Spirit Double Oaked Rye. Speaking of somebody that makes whiskey very well, it's Sagamore Spirit. I mean, they've done just a lot of their products are amazing. There's been some that are hit or miss from my personal palate. I'm not necessarily a fan of tequila or rum, so anything finished like that just isn't for me, but that's okay. That's all part of it. In my opinion, they have something for everybody, right? Because their foundation is fantastic. Their rye whiskey at its core is a great whiskey in my opinion. And then they finish it and do it in a way that's just, it can open the doors for so many people, I think. All these different finishes they have, if somebody's into sherry or somebody's into tequila or whatever it is, they finish it in a way, you know, even if you just kind of like a Manhattan, they've got that finish, right? So, and they do it in a way that it just is still a great product and kind of could be a gateway into their regular rye whiskey. Either way, I recommend Sagamore as a whole when it comes to rye whiskey, and specifically, I recommend the double oaked product. All right, number 7, Old Ezra 7. I actually didn't even piece that one together. This was after MGP acquired Lux Row. Would assume that this is a MGP product. That's from everything I've seen, that's what this is, but just a fantastic product. And again, one that really surprised me. Rossville Union was on this list. That's also an MGP rye. Kind of thought, you know, we're going to go in that same direction. But yet I tried this and immediately said, I have to go find more bottles of this. And so it's not necessarily the easiest, I would say, to find, at least in my area, but definitely findable. And I've been able to find multiple bottles of this. I even seen some online retailers that you can purchase from as well. So go that route if you don't see it in your area, possibly, but still one that I would recommend really for anybody, whether you like rye or not. You need to try this bottle. All right, number 8, Peerless was back up. It makes sense, right? They're the ones that got me into it. Peerless Double Oaked Rye. So I've mentioned before, I've heard purely rumors that this was not going to be a thing going forward. Don't know if that's the case or not, but either way, this bottle was one that I bought because I trusted the people picking it. I enjoy Peerless products. It all made sense as to why I should buy this bottle. I took it home, tried it. The next day, went out and bought more. This bottle was just an amazing store pick. I've had other store picks of this, weren't as good as the first, still very fantastic products. I've never had one that came from the distillery, so I'm not sure how that lines up, but I do know that this is not the easiest bottle to find, but findable, at least again, in my area seems to be, but either way, it was one that just really, really impressed me. This actually is one that I enjoy blinding. So there's been several times where I've actually poured a sample or had a little sample bottle, whatever the case is, and given it to somebody and said, tell me what that is, or what are your thoughts of that? And every time they're leaning towards bourbon. They're like, oh, this is whatever brand, right? And I'm like, it's not even a bourbon, it's a rye whiskey. So I think that the double oak there is kind of helping soften some of that rye, those traditional rye notes. Still a fantastic product, still keeps the rye as the foundation. And I think will help get a lot of people into it if you're not already into it. And if you are already into it, I think you still enjoy it. All right, number 9, Nulu Toasted Single Barrel Strength Rye. I think I got it all. Again, this is a store pick, same type of deal as pretty much everything else on here. One of those ones that I tried, thought it would be okay, decent, whatever, but tried it, was amazing, went back out the next day and got some more. And it reminded me so much of Michter's. And when I actually posted that on social media, they actually reached out to me and actually said that they, I believe, modeled their process after that, or whatever the case is. So it made sense as to why this does remind me of Michter's. I could find this one and I could find it at a good price. Not really going to be that big of an issue. Fantastic bottle if you can get one. And number 10, if we're going to find an alternative to one, it must mean that I like the big one of them all. So number 10 is going to be Michter's Toasted Barrel Strength Rye. This, oh man, the first time I ever had this, I was actually at a bar in Cincinnati, and an amazing bar that had all types of, huge selection of whiskeys. And I'd always heard the hype behind these, and I'd never had one. So I thought, before I ever try to even hunt this thing down or whatever the case is, I need to try it now. I asked them what it was for a pour. Not the cheapest thing in the world, but it also wasn't crazy. And it was a special occasion, all that stuff. So it made sense to try it. I tried it, and then I knew, like, I have to find not just one of these. Like, I have to be able to track a few of these down. And I just thought it was just that good. It was one of the best ones that I ever had. I still think, and like I said, Nulu's it's hanging in there for sure. And a lot of these on this list will hang in there. This particular one is just still king for me. I have had a chance to try Old Forester Barrel Proof Single Barrel. Don't have one in my collection right now. Same with Jack Daniel's Barrel Proof Rye. I actually do have that in my collection, but I haven't gotten a chance to try that one. So kind of like this weird mix of, potential kings coming for the crown type of thing. But in terms of, at least right now, one of the best whiskeys I've ever had in the rye category, it's got to be this one. And this is one that's just one of my favorite go-tos, and it's a special occasion one for me. So if it's just me hanging out at home, I, grab one of the other ones on the list for sure. But I saved some of these Michter's bottles for, birthdays or, not even such a special event, but sometimes just in general, having people over that enjoy whiskey, and I know will really appreciate when I crack some of these bottles. So that's what it's all about. Opening them, sharing with everybody, and just having a good time. And that does it. That's 10 different rye whiskeys that put rye on the map for me. It changed the game for me. It let me know that there's not just one specific category of rye or one specific palette or direction that we're going to go with rye. We can actually go all over the place. And this was pretty much my foundation. And once we got from here, I was able to try other products that have traditional rye notes to them. Maybe I should change my name, Ty the Rye Guy, right? That kind of makes sense too, right? But this was a fun one to put together. Again, I enjoyed all of these. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.